The Truth of Justice in Color, the story of a judge and a white man. In the heart of a quiet southern town named Willow Creek, Judge Daniel Turner was a towering figure. Known for his unwavering commitment to justice, he had spent decades building a reputation for being fair, impartial, and guided by the law rather than personal bias. But even a man as resolute as Judge Turner could not have anticipated the storm that would come with the trial of Charles Whitman, a wealthy white factory owner accused of exploiting his workers. The case was brought forward by Elijah Carter, a middle-aged black man who had worked tirelessly at Whitman's factory for over 20 years. Elijah, with his weathered hands and quiet strength, represented not just himself but dozens of other workers who had suffered under Whitman's oppressive regime. The factory's conditions were appalling: long hours, unsafe environments, and wages so low they barely allowed the workers to survive. Adding to this, there were numerous reports of racial discrimination, with black workers receiving harsher treatment and fewer opportunities than their white counterparts. The town was sharply divided. The wealthy elite, many of whom had benefited from Whitman's business ventures, rallied behind him, praising him as a pillar of the community. They saw the trial as an attack on a man who had brought jobs and prosperity to Willow Creek. On the other hand, the town's working-class residents, particularly those from marginalized communities, saw the trial as a long-overdue reckoning for a man who had abused his power for years. The courtroom was packed on the first day of the trial. Journalists from neighboring towns had arrived to cover what was quickly becoming a sensational case. Whitman walked in with an air of confidence, flanked by his team of high-priced lawyers. Elijah, by contrast, was a picture of quiet resilience. He stood alone, representing not just himself but the hopes of all those who had suffered silently. The trial unfolded with dramatic intensity. The defense team portrayed Whitman as a generous employer who had provided jobs and stability to the town during difficult times. They accused Elijah of being ungrateful and claimed the allegations were exaggerated. They even brought in a few workers, primarily white employees, who testified that they had never experienced mistreatment. But Elijah's side had its own arsenal of evidence. Testimonies from workers of all races painted a damning picture of the factory's conditions. Photographs of hazardous machinery, pay stubs that showed glaring wage disparities, and written complaints ignored by management all told a story of systemic abuse. Elijah's testimony was particularly powerful. With a steady voice, he recounted years of being overworked, underpaid, and humiliated, all while trying to provide for his family. As the days turned into weeks, pressure mounted on Judge Turner. Anonymous letters began arriving at his home, some warning him to rule in Whitman's favor and others urging him to deliver justice for the workers. The whispers of bribery and influence in the air were hard to ignore. The town's elite made subtle and not-so-subtle attempts to sway him, inviting him to lavish dinners or hinting at political opportunities if he sided with Whitman. But Judge Turner was a man of principles. Late at night, he would sit in his study, poring over case files and reflecting on the weight of his responsibility. He thought about the words carved above the courthouse entrance, "Justice for all." Did those words truly mean all? Or were they merely an empty promise in a town still grappling with the legacies of inequality? Finally, the day of the verdict arrived. The courtroom was silent as Judge Turner entered, his face unreadable. Elijah sat in the front row, his hands clasped tightly, while Whitman leaned back in his chair with a faint smirk, confident in his lawyer's efforts. Judge Turner's voice broke the silence. He delivered a searing statement about the principles of justice and the responsibility of those in power to act ethically. He acknowledged the town's divisions and the pressure he had faced but declared that justice could not be bought or swayed by influence. Whitman was found guilty of labor exploitation and discrimination. The court ordered him to pay substantial reparations to his workers and to improve the factory's conditions immediately. The decision sent shockwaves through the town. For some, it was a triumph, a long-overdue victory for those who had been voiceless for too long. For others, it was a betrayal, a blow to the town's wealthy elite who had always believed themselves untouchable. The aftermath of the trial was far from easy. Whitman's allies launched a smear campaign against Judge Turner, accusing him of bias and trying to tarnish his reputation. Threats against his family forced him to hire protection, and his once close relationships with some of the town's most influential figures dissolved overnight. But there were also signs of change. Elijah and his fellow workers used their settlement money to form a cooperative, creating jobs that prioritized dignity and fairness. Their success became an inspiration to others in the region, proving that justice could lead to growth and prosperity. Judge Turner, though scarred by the ordeal, found solace in knowing he had done the right thing. He had upheld the law, but more importantly, he had upheld the ideals of equality and fairness. Years later, when Judge Turner retired, his story became a cornerstone of the town's history. Schools taught the trial as a pivotal moment in the fight for justice, and Elijah Carter's cooperative stood as a testament to resilience and hope. And so, the story of a judge and a white man became more than a courtroom drama, it became a lesson in courage, integrity, and the enduring power of truth.